And welcome back to Reformed Perspective. I'm Pastor Josiah Espinoza. Great to have you back on. I'm excited about today's conversation. As always, I guess you can say I'm always excited. Today, I got a brother here who is with me. I've been getting to know this brother now for a few weeks now, actually about a month now. And we've had several conversations together, just getting to know each other. Had coffee already. And I'm pretty excited about talking to this brother. He's been a lay elder at Oasis High Desert in Hesperia for about 7 years. He's now the senior pastor, or lead planting pastor, I guess you could say now, the lead planting pastor of Christ Alone Community Church in Hesperia. He's got this dope clothing line, increasedecrease.org, where you can actually buy merchandise, buy shirts like this. This is Stephen being martyred. It's awesome. So and a portion of his merchandise goes to missionary work to persecuted churches in Asia, I want to say. South Asia, okay. So, man, it's good to have him. His name is Brother Gerry Escalante. Brother, good to have you, man.
Dude, thank you for having me. This is amazing. I love the getup you have here. It's just, I'm number 80.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, this is episode number 80, bro. So good to have you. I'm gonna have my phone here. I'm not trying to not listen to you when you're talking, but just in case people got questions, I could field them right here on my phone while we're watching live. So I'm pretty excited about this, man. It's been an interesting month for you, bro.
Yes, it has. Oh my goodness.
Oh man.
And it continues to be interesting. We're gonna, as you know, start our. We're leaving the community center. This past Sunday was our last Sunday service there.
Yeah.
And so now we're moving into my house, starting this Sunday.
Awesome. Church planting.
Yes, sir.
Actually, you know what? I think. There you go. Let's try that again. Let's say it one more time. What's happening with you again? Because I don't think we got audio on that.
Oh no! So don't add audio. Have you say things in my mouth.
It probably picked you up from far away, but let's try that again. So what's going on with you?
Sure.
Let's rewind that real quick. So
okay.
I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, I'll show you. Yeah.
All right, but what's going on with you, man?
So like I was saying, man, it's this past Sunday, yesterday. Yeah, we're Monday. Yesterday was our last service at the building in Hesperia off of I Avenue at the Community Christian Center.
Okay.
And so this upcoming Sunday on the 20th, we will be now we're moving church at our house. So it's been a lot of planning, and it's gonna be crazy, I think.
Yeah.
But as you know, I mean, you had your house church as well.
Yeah.
Before you moved in.
Yeah, we started right here in our living room. Just holding services, and this was in the middle of the pandemic when technically we weren't supposed to do.
Yeah. We have all these FBI's coming through the window right now. No, I hear you, man. You were an inspiration though, because I'd known about you through Mike Manis, and so you would pop up on our feed, and I'd be like, "This guy is still meeting. That's sick."
Yeah,
like, dude.
So we kept meeting, and it actually started with Bible studies, and that's where it started with Wednesday or Tuesday night and Thursday night women's and men's Bible studies.
Okay.
That's how it started. And people started just coming. People started giving their lives to the Lord. People wanted to get baptized, and it just started growing from that, man.
That's crazy.
And from that, it's just from genuine people wanting to get to know the Lord, inviting one another to the Bible studies.
Right.
And from that, we were able to get a core group together.
Right.
Where, that's kind of how we started the launch.
Wow. Yeah.
So
that's what we're hoping for is just, something that would. And I'm not saying we should always look for the newest trend or whatever, because house churches are pretty big, but it's just providential. We're just we're not being kicked out, but community center is growing, and they let us know in advance, hey, we're gonna need this space. So God's the one just kind of pushing us out into the fringe. You're like, okay, whatever you want. So yeah, for sure.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Man, this was one thing that we've been talking about over and over again. Is just, I guess, the feelings of discouragement when it comes to ministry. I know you've experienced a lot of discouragement, and I don't know how deep you want to get into the details, but going from a church building to not having a church building to going into the home and then moving into another community center and then now not being into the community center and going back into a home.
Right.
I can't imagine what you've seen and experienced, and I can't imagine what you're going through right now with your congregation.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a fair point. As I was driving here, I was listening to a sermon on leadership, and interestingly enough, a leader is when God uses a leader, it's not because he has the qualities or skill set or education, this and that. What God starts using is he starts emptying the man, so that his power and his grace and strength could flow through him. And so, and I think that's kind of what's been going on. In my, it's always been this thing where God strips me, so I won't rely on nothing, and it's His good pleasure to do so. And it's interesting because the brother said sometimes we take on more on ourselves than we should. And we start to drown. If we start to drown and start getting no more passionate because we're just burdened by so much. He's like, did God place that for you, or did you place it upon yourself? And with me, it's always been that where it's like, and I think you mentioned this earlier, like we've never looked for opportunities to preach. Oh, let me preach, let me pastor. It's just God's like, okay, who's next? So.
Yeah. And so now
Absolutely.
You're next.
And now I'm next, yeah. Now I'm next, yeah. And just as easily as he can say you're up next, he could say next.
Next.
Right? Next thing. So yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, because we've talked, and you talked about how you got introduced to a Sovereign Grace Church. So
Yes.
that's a specific movement of a church. It's not a denomination. They could be considered a denomination.
Yeah,
Kind of like
right.
how church. So, but before that, before you got introduced to a Reformed experience, what was your walk? Did you have a walk, or what was your journey like at that point?
Man, so you mean, so it's kind of crazy, man. I mean, I don't know how far you want me to go back, because I grew up.
We got time, bro.
All right. So I grew up in a conservative Baptist, the CBA. It's called Conservative Baptist Association, and there I think mainly in the West Coast, California mainly. So it's just like your typical Baptist church, but at the time, the big fads were out, right? Like the prayer of Jabez. People were like loving that, the 40 Days of Purpose. And it was around that time, It was around that time where I was wholly converted. Prior to that, prior to 19 years old, at 10 years old, I was introduced to the Christian faith. My parents got saved radically. I saw it. So my faith was not based my own. It was based more like, whoa, God can do something that's insane. Yeah. And I want that, but God moved differently. So it wasn't until I was about 19 that the Spirit of the Lord truly came and like converted me, right? And that's for another story. But during that time, late 90s, early 2000s, you had pragmatism, right? Whatever works, the church is gonna go that way, And it was like, and it was frustrating for me because I was like, I'm reading the Bible and then I'm going to church on Sundays. I'm like, it doesn't pair up. It's all this moralistic stuff, and at the end of the sermon, come to Jesus, the whole altar call. Right. So I was frustrated, man, and I didn't know. And then I got introduced to Desiring God. John Piper's that book book blew me away. I was like, oh my gosh, it's all about joy. It's all about this. It's all about that. About the happiness, seeking pleasure. I'm trying to tell my pastor, look at this. This is what we need to be preaching, And so, he kind of brushed it off. But it wasn't until when my buddy, he introduced me to Sinclair Ferguson, man. Mm-hmm. Whoa. And the article was basically preaching Christ. Good night. That's when I was like, this is it. Cause all of the scriptural references that like gave the foundation of who Christ is in the Old Testament, the New, it blew my mind. And then that's when I went back to the pastor and said, look, I'm sorry, but I don't know how this works out. I don't know how I'm not a preacher. I'm not a pastor. I don't know, but this seems to be what you're not doing. You know, and I said and I said that as like, I don't know, like passionate as I could. I wasn't trying to insult the man.
convictional.
It was convictional, yeah. And so we had a kind of more of he and I were going back and forth, and so but that was the journey that I was like, oh, I need to see Christ preached from every text of the Bible, and then John Piper's desiring God, like that, just coupled with everything. I said, I don't know, where do I find this? Where do I find this? So I went to a conference, Resolve conference, back in the day with John MacArthur, and it was based on Jonathan Edwards' resolutions.
Yep.
Yeah, you remember that, right? So I went, and then for the first time, I was hearing John MacArthur, and I was very familiar with John MacArthur, other speakers, but it wasn't until I heard C.J. Mahaney, and that dude was like preaching the gospel in such a passionate way, man. Like, just, he started kind of defining or describing what it is to preach Christ, and so that, like, just, I was like, okay, that's awesome. And so that's kind of where I began, and I my wife and I, we had just gotten married in 2006, 2007, and we needed to, we stood at our church for a while. We were kind of we're still going back and forth with the pastor and the leadership team. They weren't paying attention to us, and I said, we got to go. We need to get nourished. We need to sit under true preaching under Christ being sovereign and ruling and stuff. So that's where it began, man. 2007 is when we went to Sovereign Grace, but 2 years earlier, that's when I was just going nuts on this whole thing. Like, what? I knew about Reformed theology, but I didn't want that to like influence what I knew to be true, as far as like, I need to hear Christ be preached.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's I think I think that's why they called us the Young Restless and Reformed movement. Because
That's a good point.
young Christian people were getting involved with Reformed doctrine, and we're seeing the majesty of Christ and the exaltation of the gospel,
Right.
and Christ being preached in ways that the superficial kind of what is that? Seeker-sensitive churches were still, to this day, are still kind of engaging in, where it's more like a universal message about how to become better, how to be better, how to some principles about being more godly, but it's more superficial in its
Right.
approach to the exposition of the scripture. And then when you get introduced to preachers, preachers like Sinclair and Piper and MacArthur and Paul Washer. Paul Washer was my go-to guy, man, early on. And I didn't know what was so different about him, but just the way that he preached. And John Piper as well, just the way that he preached. And honestly, I liked their preaching, but whenever I'd hear an apologetical approach to Reformed doctrine from, and it was James White.
Oh yeah.
When I heard his apologetical approach, I hated it.
I
wrestled with
why?
it. Well,
Why?
because you have your traditions that you grow up in,
Right.
and you're taught certain things. You're raised with certain doctrines and theology,
Right.
And then you hear this other side that makes a lot of sense and is basically disproving all of these other traditional things and ideas that you've been raised to believe.
Deconstruction.
Yep. Deconstructed. Absolutely.
And that's probably the most positive sense of deconstruction. I mean, I don't want to go off topic, but I think that's a interesting way to look at the early onset of this term deconstruction of faith and stuff. But that's cool, man. I didn't know that. I didn't know that James White was like someone that challenged your faith. That's cool.
He challenges everybody.
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
Let's just get serious
Right.
about it. But that was really my first exposure to meaningful, thoughtful Christian theology, where you actually wrestle not just with what you believe, but with other belief systems.
Right.
Because, and he says this all the time, it's like, if you're not aware of your traditions, then you become a slave to your traditions.
Nice. Wow.
So, because then you assume that your traditions must be the truth, and if they're not the truth, then you've been lied to your whole life.
Right.
And then you assume, well, then God's been lying to me my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of assuming that you've been wrong, you think there's no way God would have allowed me to be wrong for this long. So that right there is it feels chaotic when you feel that tension between being exposed to what sounds more truthful than what you believe to be true. And so I wrestle with that. I wrestled it, bro.
You know, and going back to your earlier statement of like, that's why I think, you know, that whole Young, Restless, and Reformed came out was because it was a push against this moralistic preaching, because I think most of us like tasted the world. We knew what the world was like. We tasted it. We reveled in it, and we knew that we sucked when we came to Christ. You know, that we were terrible. We were like, and morals is not going to help me.
Yeah.
You know, and there was this strong distaste for it. And so something or someone needed to compete for our affections, and it had to be the supremacy of Christ.
Yeah, amen.
You know, so
absolutely.
I like that.
So before you became a Christian, though, where did you live? Where did you grow up?
So, man, I was. I'm not sure if you're familiar with East Los Angeles. That's where I was born. I was born there at the age of 2. We moved to like the neighboring city more eastward, which is Montebello.
Vato loco, bro.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. That's right. What they call it? Jardín 13 was around there, dude.
Yeah.
So that's Pigo. So, so that's where I grew up. And the interesting thing is that when my parents were able to like afford a tiny little house, you know, because my parents were immigrants. They came from, my mom's from El Salvador, my dad's from Mexico, and they were unsaved. And so when they came, and they bought this little house, we lived, and this is the church I grew up in, but we lived across the street, literally facing this Baptist church. We never went, dude. We went to a Methodist church for so weird, like 10 miles away, which was odd. So that's where I grew up for all of my childhood, adolescence, and then early, you know, in manhood, and then when I got married, Whittier, and then expecting our first child, we moved up here because we were convinced that we wanted my wife to stay home with the baby. You know, we saw it scripturally. We were totally convinced, and at the time, my wife and I were working, and we couldn't afford just with one income over there, so we're looking for cheaper living.
Yeah. And then you moved up here?
We moved up here, man. Yeah.
In 2000, that was right before the recession.
Yeah, it was. Okay. It really, really was. That was in 2007, and then we were still 5 years down there. We didn't move up here till 2013, 2014.
Okay.
So when we were married, we're 5 years, without a child down there.
So everything was still cheap up here.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was
dirt cheap.
It was dirt cheap. Yeah. And then just like, you know, I mean, not even like 2 years living up here, it's just everything just started skyrocketing. Yeah, quickly.
Yeah, because even when me and my wife, we first moved up into Adelanto.
Okay.
In 2015, and we bought a house for like $175, which it still was cheap. And it was a big house. Right. We couldn't afford anything. The closest thing down in San Bernardino, Fontana, was like $350,000. Right. Which technically is cheap for Fontana, because now it's like $500,000. Or more. Yeah. So I totally get that. So, but you were talking about being in a band. Was that before or after Christ?
That was after Christ.
Okay, so
before Christ, I had like.
But it was a Christian band.
Yeah, we were dealing with this whole understanding, like, how can a band be Christian? We're Christians, right? So we had to like philosophically try to understand, and so we didn't want to be called Christian, but all our lyrics were Christian. So we were just, so I don't know what, but we went through so many name changes. This was so prior to Christ, I was like always wanted to be like that cool rock star dude, but I didn't know how to play no instrument, anything. It wasn't until after Christ, dude, that I had a passion for worship, you know? And and I started picking up the guitar and just learning this, you know, those 4 chords, G, D, C, and E minor.
E minor. You play 95% of the Christian songs was just like that. And you
Oh my goodness!
just need a capo.
Yeah, I just needed a capo, and a lot of that theology was, but it was so like it was babyish, and even to this day, it's like there's things where like like the faith of a child is what Jesus is after, right? So yeah, that was pretty cool.
And you guys played alternative rock. Was it sounded like Mana?
Not even, not even, man. I think we were trying to sound like everything in between Radiohead and as far as like Oasis, dude, just you two in there throwing Smashing Pumpkins. It's all, I was a '90s kid,
So punk rock.
Kinda, yeah, and yeah, so it's just it was a interesting time because we were, if we had stuck to our guns and knew what we wanted to do, I think we would have gone further. Because
what was the name of your band?
Oh man,
The first one.
The first one was our very first one was we were called Unveiled, based on 2 Corinthians chapter 3:18, right?
Okay, cool.
With all unveiled faces. Then we found out that some other band had that name, so we couldn't take it.
Okay.
And we didn't want to get into any like legal stuff. So from there on, we just kept changing every other month, dude. We could not come to a consensus, and it killed us. And we were practicing at our youth group room, and so we had like really just whatever kind of ghetto gear, man. But we went to different places. We played in a lot of places around the scene over there,
Like
during
Southern California.
Yeah, during like during the days of POD was getting big,
Sweet.
So there was a coffee shop down over there in Bellflower, and they always had like just bands all the time, and all the bands were trying to sound like either POD or Delirious, or you know what I mean, and we were like, no, we don't want to follow this. If we always understood if God, and not to like dismantle those bands, I mean, because they had some good stuff and they were reaching kids.
Yeah.
But we were just like, we don't want to sound like the world. If God is the God of all creation, why can't we come up with stuff, original things?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, that was kind of, so we ended off by calling ourselves Soli, and it was based off the 5 solis or solas, but we.
Why does that sound so familiar?
Soli? Yeah, dude, that's what we ended up with. Maybe.
Soli.
And Soli, yeah.
Man, it sounds so familiar. I wonder if you went to go play at one of my youth groups.
You probably,
camps or something like that.
Huh.
Who knows, man?
Yeah, right.
Somewhere.
Don't look
weird,
it up.
Somewhere weird. I know, right?
Right on. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's one thing that I think, unfortunately, a lot of the more traditional Reformed Baptist kind of congregations in traditional Reformed folks have a tendency to not like alternative music. Man, I love Spanish kind of style music. Salsa, merengue. I love it. I love it all.
Right, right.
And so because I grew up listening to that kind of Christian music. The David y Abraham. There was a salsa or merengue group that played Christian music like that. I grew up listening to all kinds of different kinds of Christian music. But now, man, just being involved in Reformed circles, I find it's either a specific way of playing Christian music or very, very traditional.
Right.
And I don't know what it is.
I agree.
I don't know what it is. I wonder if we just need some more salsa lovers in Reformed circles.
Right. Yeah, they just pluck them out from the world, right? From their that environment, and have them have that passion for salsa music. When I was growing up, my parents were like radically just changed. I don't know if maybe you might remember this, but there's this artist called Paola or Marino.
Sounds so familiar.
And so they had those musics, those types of like salsa and geared for kids. They had a song about Noah, So that's what I grew up listening to. And then, at that stage, you're kind of like, you're a kid. I'm 10 years old. My parents want us to sing in front of the church, so they play the track or whatever.
Yeah.
So we started singing and stuff. But as you grow older, you're like, I just kind of want to get away from that
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, I hear you. There's a lack of it, and there's so many. I don't know. Like, what do you think it is? Do you think it's that there's the Hispanic population is still like? So this is what I always say. my heart sometimes just yearns for the Hispanic population to have more better theology.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, just like black people, right? It's like, why is it that Hispanics and black people have like the not the lowest, but their
Non-reformed doctrine.
non-reformed,
Yeah,
right? And,
yeah.
and it's kind of more of the emotion and the feeling.
Yeah, I think partially it has to do with culture. Like I said, I'll say this about Hispanic folks is, I think it's because they grow up Catholic, and so they already have an idea of who Martin Luther is
Oh.
and who John Calvin is, because they're taught about Martin Luther. He was the one who started. He broke off from the church. He's the one that started the Reformation, and he's a heretic in the eyes of the Catholic Church to this day. Still, you know,
Right, yeah.
So like as soon as you start talking about Reformed theology and Martin Luther and John Calvin, they're immediately put off, at least for the Catholic
Interesting.
tradition.
Yeah.
Because even my grandma was very, very Catholic. And I told her that I was going to be a pastor. She was like, oh, Protestant pastor? And I'm like, yeah, tita, Protestant pastor. She said, oh, that's good, but imagine if I would have told her I'm going to be a monk, then she would have flipped. She would have flipped out, She would have been super excited for me.
Right. Yeah.
Or a priest.
Yeah.
So I think you have that side where they're already kind of against Reformed theology and Protestantism to begin with. The other side is, I think, because there is that deep influence of like the Pentecostal charismatic movement in South America and Mexico, that as soon as they see what happens in the more traditional reform, as soon as you start talking about hymns, start talking about confessions and creeds and Reformed doctrine and theology, and they're like, oh, what about the Spirit, bro? And I was like,
Yeah.
no, I believe in the Spirit,
Right. Like, let it loose, right? Just be loose about it, right? No, I get you.
So I think that's why certain groups and certain pastors like John Piper, Sam Storms, and I don't know if Paul Washer is a closeted one, like continuationist.
I agree.
Because I love what he has to say about the Spirit,
Yes.
But these kinds of and sovereign grace movements where they're also emphasizing, a need for a greater outpouring and manifestation of the Spirit.
Absolutely.
In the life of the Christian.
If you, I remember because Sovereign Grace, they were. I'm not sure now how well they're with like church planting, but Juarez in Mexico, dude, there's a Sovereign Grace there, and Juarez, it's like one of like the most violent places on earth, and so, and I think that's pretty cool. Like you have that spirit, and then you have theology that's coupling that, the charismatic gifts as well as Reformed theology, perfect mesh. It should be one and the same in a sense, There shouldn't be a divide, if you will, but unfortunately there is. Yeah.
One thing I did want to talk to you a little bit about was TikTok.
Yes.
You brought it up to me a couple times already. And
have I?
Yeah,
Really? I thought this was the first time I brought it up.
No,
That's
this is like
weird.
at least the second or third time, which is
Okay.
interesting because, my brother's super into it.
Okay.
But he watches it for like the funny videos.
Entertainment, right?
Yeah,
right.
for the entertainment purposes. And so I'm put off by it because half of the stuff he sends me is just not funny. And the other half is just like, all right, that's kind of funny, but it's garbage.
Yeah.
And then so one time I took the courage to download it. And as I was trying to create a profile and trying to understand it, all I kept seeing was like, and I felt really weird. It was just half dressed teenagers dancing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do this, man.
Yeah.
So I took it off my phone immediately.
Yeah. So the only reason I even got into TikTok was because of the shirts, right? To promote the shirts. That's it. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Increasedecrease.com, .org.
Yes.
Go check it out. It's awesome.
And that's kind of what I got into because my brother-in-law, he's got a printing, he has the printing shirt shop. It's called T-Shirt Storm, and they print all of our shirts. So when you go into our website and stuff, and then he was telling me, he's like, "Hey man, have you ever tried TikTok? It's crazy." He's like, "We just posted a video, and it just garnered all this stuff." So I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." So then so I was kind of looking into it, and I had heard all those arguments, like, "Oh my gosh, it's like this," and then our previous pastor, he got into TikTok first because he was talking about like, this is where the next generation is at. How do we reach them, right? And so that's kind of like pulled me in like as another thing. I was like, okay, but yes, everything you said, you stand correct. It is garbage, man. As far as like, it's like you feel like, oh my gosh, like, no, I'm not. I'm not, a guy trying to look for underage girls or nothing. And you're like scrolling, and you don't even know how old they are anymore. So it's because they look like women, but the cool part about it was that, I kid you not, like my first video got like 0 views, which is understandable.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure this out. And, but what's encouraging me is that there's a lot of more content coming from when I started was about maybe 6 months ago. There was less content of like Christian content. And now you're seeing more and more. You're seeing like people just video street preachers. It's nuts. And you're seeing a lot of that content. You're seeing a lot of people engage and share. My favorite one so far is this young brother who transitioned from he was born a male, was living a life of homosexuality, transitioned or started having surgery and started looking like a woman. And about 4 months ago, the Lord just laid a hold of him.
Wow.
Oh my! And so
Amazing.
all he's doing is like just preaching to that community.
Praise God.
And I mean, there's tears swelling up in my face when I saw this dude. I reached out to him. I said, "Man, you're inspiring. I just want to send you a shirt, man. Like rep the king, And he responded back. I mean, it was so cool. But he's talking about those issues. If you're struggling with homosexuality, you cling to Christ. You can tell that he's just a baby, and he's just saying, read the word, like the word is this, So I'm like, man, are you being discipled? But go, man, be a bull in a china shop. Who cares, right? Yeah. So when I first saw him, he only had, I don't know, like 100 maybe followers, and now he's got like 13,800 people, which
Amazing.
is, but he hasn't compromised his message.
Amazing.
You know what I mean? So I'm like, Lord, this is so cool. Like this is how you do it and stuff. But at the same time, you're gonna run.
Well, there's always the risk of it. I mean, I guess
TV, everything. Yeah. But I hear you.
I think every generation has its thing. For
It's
us,
true.
for me, it was MySpace.
Yeah.
That was scary for my parents. I remember they were like, MySpace, there's creepers on there, and it was true. There was creepers on there, just like there was creepers on Facebook, and just like there was creepers on Twitter, and everywhere. So in terms of like our kids, I don't think TikTok is the smartest thing to let them get involved with. I mean, I just watched this video the other day of this woman talking about how sexual predators are on TikTok. And I'm like, absolutely. Don't let your children go on TikTok. But let us men at least try to do something with the gospel.
Yeah. I mean, really, yeah.
I mean, that's what we should be doing. And this is what I was talking to you about before is, at what point do I draw the line, though? How many things do I need to be involved with in order to be considered on trend or edgy enough? And I don't have the energy to do it.
Yeah. And it's going to get even less, right, as we grow older and our kids grow older, But that's a good question. I was discouraged just yesterday because, like, I feel like I'm being pulled apart too, and my focus is I want these shirts. The purpose for these shirts, man, was just that people would see a design, they like it, they wear it, and then just you wear it out, and people ask, "What is that?" And it gives the most shy Christian the opportunity to tell them a little bit about Jesus. Yeah, that's all I wanted, and so. Now being not full-time pastor, but part-time, full-time working, full-time dad, full-time husband, and then it's like I'm seeing. I think we talked about is we need to hire social media. Like this is to the point where like if in this world, and I know we shouldn't substitute obviously the power of God. He can do whatever he wants, you know. And so, but it almost seems that like, you know, in the social media world, you need someone to be on top of it.
Yeah, and I
Depends what you want. Like
that's
you said.
where I have the difficulty is, I don't have money. I don't have a producer. I don't
Right.
have a social media
Nope,
guy.
yeah.
You know, so to a certain degree, I think I'm just so scared of adding anything else that I have to maintain and have to keep up with, and have to respond to. I hadn't been on Twitter for like, I think like 3 or 4 years.
Oh wow, okay.
And just the other day, I recreated one just for my YouTube content, for this YouTube page. But even then, I'm just like barely on it. I'm barely doing things on it, you know, because I just don't want to. I guess you could say. But I guess it's different for TikTok because I'm already making videos. You know, I guess you can say so.
Yeah, you throw them up there, and the algorithm will pick it up. And sometimes I've placed videos where the algorithm says this is too edgy, and they will not. I'll get 0 views. Like
Yeah.
they will, or they stop it. You know, just because I'm talking about martyrs. You know, dying for the faith. You know, and stuff like that. And so it's all kind of controlled in a sense. You know, and so the ones that we see sometimes. The algorithm is throwing stuff at our faces, you know, just because it's the most popular one, because it knows you're a male, you know, and it's just it's a crazy world. It really is. But yeah, that's kind of, you know, I have Twitter. I can't get into it. I'm having a difficult time getting into Twitter. I post whatever I post on Instagram or on TikTok on there. I don't have a YouTube account. That's something that we were thinking about too, my wife and I. But we were like you said, like, I don't know. Should I?
Yeah.
You know, should I put more things on there, or I don't know.
Yeah. Nah.
No, that's the answer.
Yeah.
Man.
So
nah.
I mean, I started posting my videos from YouTube into Rumble, just because who knows what will happen with YouTube and small channels like mine. So I didn't want to lose all my content, you know. But I don't know, man. It's just church planting right now takes precedence in my heart and my mind. This is just like I've told you. This is for fun, man. I love doing this. We get to talk about all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But church planting is priority for me. You know, of course, it's the Lord, my family, and church planting and job are neck and neck. Just because I have to work, but in terms of importance, the kingdom is always going to come before my work. You know, I just have to treat my work more importantly because it pays for my bills and things like that. But man,
and that's a field too, though. The job is a field, right? That's
right.
That's one thing I don't want to ever lose. If I don't know, like I never want to stop rubbing shoulders with the world per se. And I think I've seen a lot of pastors that are full time, you know, that they just get swamped by their sheep. And there's nothing. I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with it. It's just, are you still like out there with the world? Are you still like engaging with the culture? You know.
and how do you think a pastor like that stays involved with the world? I guess you can say, because the last thing you would say is be like, yeah, just go start drinking at the bars. You'll start meeting some unbelievers. You know?
Right. I don't know what it looks. I don't know what it looks like. You're right. I don't know what it would look like to certain people. But do you? But is it? Could it be as simple as like as you're going? So like it's almost like once they're out of the element of pastor, they like switch it off. So I'm going to the market. And then does that make sense? And I'm not engaging no more with people like that. So that's something I was gonna let my congregation or the church know is I don't know about you, but you know how sometimes when you have sermons and God says, I'm gonna make you go through experience where you're preaching first before you preach it, or even afterwards, like, okay, son, here you go, like walk in what you just said, and you're like, you're not expecting it. So what was it, like 2 weeks ago, I was really convicted about this passage, because we're going over Philippians, where Paul says to live is Christ, and to die is gain, right? I thought I could preach that whole passage quickly, not quickly, but in one sermon, and I was a fool to think that, right? And so, but after preaching to live as Christ and what that means, I took it upon myself. I said, you know what, Lord, I'm going to challenge myself that every single day I'm going to because what was the thrust of everything, to live as Christ. No one's going to live for an idea. No one's going to be dominated by an idea, or have their life dominated by just a single idea. No one's going to be dominated by a historical figure. We don't do that, it's ludicrous. But if that person was risen from the dead, that's a whole different story now. And so I was telling our people, the only reason why it's inevitable, and we are what's the word? We cannot compromise to not to live how we want to live, is because Christ has been raised from the dead. And I said, because Paul's argument in 1 Corinthians 15 is the fact that if Christ has not been risen from the dead, then my preaching is in vain. You're still in your sins. Your faith is futile. You just go to the bar, hit it up, party, go to Vegas, party it up. But I said, but because he has been raised, now your life must be dominated if you're a Christian, right? If you're elected. So because of that, I said, how many of us are living in the light of this side of eternity, with understanding that he has been risen from the dead, therefore I no longer belong to me. So I said, what does that look like? And so I became like the mad scientist, and I said, every day, Lord, you direct me to ask somebody, hey, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. I know this is weird, but do you need prayer? Is there anything I can pray for you about? Bro, it's been crazy. The crazy things that I was like, this is incredible. And it's something so simple that way. And I started thriving. I started getting like this this drive to do that, to see the craziness of God's presence, what he's going to do today, right? So all that to say, I think as pastors, going back to that whole issue, I think that's what it is, man. It's like we turn it off when we're just doing life outside of church. And I don't know, man. I'm like, I think that's one way that I'm seeing, okay, Lord, I don't want to be that person that just is up there, studying through the week, and no one would even know that I'm a Christian or I'm even a pastor. There's this one kid, man, at McDonald's. I just asked him straight out, oh, dude, I got a good story for this one, man. This was hilarious. I was going to use this as an example sermon. Yeah. So this is funny.
You can still preach it after you say it, so go ahead.
No, because it was supposed to be this past Sunday.
Oh, okay,
Check this out. I'm in the line of McDonald's with my family. We're ordering, right? So we're both ordering. I mean, because they have like those two lanes. I'm ordering, and this other car is ordering. I'm done with my order, but it's packed. So I'm done, and then I move this way, right? But it's packed. This guy gets done, and he races to cut me off, bro. And I'm like, no. I'm like, that's insane.
That's how people get shot, bro.
Right. But the worst part of it is that in the back he had and I'm not gonna. Oh yeah, in the back he had the "Not of This World" sticker. So I'm like, I'm telling my wife, I'm just living it. I'm like, I hope that's his wife's car. I'm hoping that's his wife's car, and it's not his. And he looks at me, dude, and he just stares at me like
mad dogging you?
Yeah, no, kind of like, what are you gonna do about it? I'm like, what? Because I'm looking at him, and I have shades on. I'm looking, and he's looking at me back, and he's not giving me a mad dog. He's just like, so, like, yeah. And I was like, whoa. So I'm like, so he has that "Not of This World," but right next to it, he says, what is this? Something about life is better at the beach. And I'm like, those are two contradictory statements, dude. If you're not in this world, but life is better to, like, what? So I'm going, like, I'm losing my mind, and I'm like, I'm going to use this as a sermon illustration, all this stuff. And thank God he didn't let me use it, because I think I would have gotten mad and started sinning up there, bro. So I'm glad I didn't. Anyway, all that to say, so he drives in front of me, and he leaves. And then this guy, Dominic, who's at the cash register, I say, hey, I'm a Christian. I give him my spiel. I said, is there anything you would like for me to pray for? And he looks at me, dude, and he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah. And so I told him, he's like, dude, he's like, I'm Catholic. He's like, and I have never seen like someone like a Christian try to live out their faith. Wow. I was like, whoa. And I said, oh man, that's cool. I'm like, hey, I'm a pastor. He's like, really? I'm like, would you ever want to study the Bible? He's like, yeah, but I work on Sundays also. I'm like, oh man, what? I'm just like, this is crazy. And so he says, could you pray for my mom, Jill? Dude, I don't even know him, and he's like confessing stuff, right? That was wonderful. This other lady in Best Buy, dude, I did the same thing, and her eyes started tearing up, and she's looking at me, and she's like, "I'm gonna cry." I'm like, "Whoa!" I'm like, "I'm sorry. Like, what did I do?" And she's like, "My brother is dying right now in the hospital." And I said, "Oh, I'm like, I'm gonna pray for you." And I was gonna do that right then and there, but I'm like, people started gathering on the line behind me, and I just got into the car, man, and I just kind of was like, oh, Lord, that was like burdensome, you know. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, all that to just say, it's like that. I think is probably a good way, just one way, you know. Maybe going to the bar, like you said, just could be another way. I don't know. God, whatever God wants to do,
And I think that's awesome. I think that's such a good mentality to have. I think you're right though, that we're already so involved with people's lives and pastoring and shepherding and loving people where they are, and that's what we're called to do for our people. That it's easy to kind of just like feel justified in saying, well, I've done my part this week. Let someone else take care of it, Yeah. And so I'm guilty of this, bro. I'm guilty of this, So I love that you want to be more intentional about it. I do too, man. Yeah. I've been really wanting to be more intentional about it, talking to people, letting people know, how I can pray for them, or share Christ with somebody.
Right.
Man, it's too easy and I have to be real, man. It's easy to just be like, but I'm studying and I'm preaching and I'm counseling and I'm sharing and I'm leading and I'm doing work and I'm doing school. I just don't have time to share the gospel with somebody. And the implications of that, when you talk about it out loud, you're like, well, essentially what you're saying is somebody's soul who is headed towards hell is not good enough for you to stop and talk to them and tell them about Christ.
And it's twofold, right? It's like you almost just hear God say, "Time? What time? The time? You mean my time I've given you, right? Like, why would you place anything? What's more important, right? It's that whole like question, like it's like I love how Jesus says, like, what's more important? If one of your sheep falls down, or this guy needs to be healed, like what do you mean?
Yeah, like, getting to the topic of mercy, being merciful above all else.
Absolutely, and that requires sacrifice. That requires, all kinds of stuff. And I hear you, man. Totally hear you on that. But yeah.
So church planting, man.
Yes, sir. Church planting is not for wimps.
First week,
or is it
next week? Oh yeah. No.
No, have you heard this book by Mike McGlinchey? He calls it church planting. I think it's church planting is for wimps. I don't know. It's a little small, but it's such an interesting book because he dives into it. But
I guess if you want to say that I'm wimpy already without Christ, and through Christ I'm not that wimpy, then yeah, sure. Church planting is for wimps, sure.
Right.
But I'm not a wimp.
No, right. No. Hey, I'm here. Terrible. But please, yes, go on.
No, I was just gonna say, church planting is probably the most exciting and heartbreaking at the same time. It's the most encouraging and discouraging thing at the same time. It's the craziest thing I've ever experienced in ministry. I've been doing ministry in different areas of church life now for about 10 years. Whether that's worship ministry, sharing the gospel with the homeless, going door to door preaching the gospel, whether that's leading home groups, whether that's, whatever it is, whatever it's been. Church planting has really tested my trust in the Lord to the greatest degree. I'm talking about like 1 minute you get a text saying, man, I really appreciate everything you've been doing. I love you so much. The next second or minute you get a phone call saying, I don't think I'm going to come back to the church. Or getting a phone call saying, me and my wife are not doing well. And we're thinking about divorcing. And that's like, man, how do you go from that to that? And man, I've had to learn how to compartmentalize how I experience people, how I experience God in the middle of all this. Probably the most testing thing for me, and this was like 4 months into our church plan.
Oh my goodness!
Is we were getting ready to baptize a couple to dedicate both of their babies. And on that Sunday, we dedicated both of their babies. And after the service, this is right here in our living room. After the service, we were getting ready to go and baptize them in our backyard pool. And as I'm getting ready to go, one of our congregation members passed away.
Oh, man.
And 8 days before that, his wife had passed away.
Wow. Wow.
So the craziest thing is I had to go from the living room being overjoyed in presenting these two babies, beautiful kids, going into my room, changing, just weeping in my bed real quick, getting up, walking out, being overjoyed for these two souls that are being baptized, and then having to drive to the home where he was laying, passed away. That was the hardest day of my life.
Oh my goodness!
And
the roller coaster,
bro. I can't even tell you. I can't even tell you. And I'll tell you right now, in that very moment, had I not known about the supremacy and the sovereignty and the goodness of God, then I don't know what I would have given up on church planting right then and there. I would have been like, nah, if this is church planting, I don't want nothing to do with it. I want zero to do with this, man.
Right?
But
wow.
man, I'm telling you, and that was a little bit over a year ago now.
Oh
so,
my goodness!
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
God.
man.
How? Yeah. How do you compose yours? How did you I mean, we know the textbook answers, right?
Yeah.
How did God, like you said, the supremacy of Christ, like that got you through? Like what sparked inside? What was it about his presence?
When I was weeping in my room, it was very simple. It was just 4 words that came to me, or like two sentences. It's just, weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. And that was it. That's all I needed to hear in that moment. So I wiped my tears. I got ready to go baptize. And I celebrated.
Right.
And I smiled. And I was actually joyful for them. Like I was actually happy that they were making this public dedication and declaration to the Lordship of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
And then after, we had pozole and we had fellowship. And after we said goodbye, back to mourning.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. I mean, in the sense of like that, those words of encouragement like that, in that moment, you're not thinking that. It's planted in you by the Spirit. That's awesome.
I don't know if you've thought about this or you've experienced, I'm sure you've experienced this, but just the actual pains of ministry, and it's easy for people to assume that the pastor has like this extra kick of God,
right,
to just be able to handle these things,
right.
And I'm telling you right now, it is not easy.
Right.
It's not easy, man. It's heart aching. It's soul wrenching.
Right.
And there's times where I'm laying in bed sleepless.
Right.
Because I'm so burdened for my people.
Right.
And for what they're experiencing and for what they're going through. I cannot help but experience that pain as their pastor, you know.
Right. Let me ask you this though: is you know how Paul says to Timothy or to the Corinthians, "Imitate me as I imitate Christ." Do you think that you are prepared? Because I'm the more I'm thinking about how Paul speaks to the Philippian church, because we're getting over there, it's almost like he's kind of saying that like listen, Paul's skin is thick as a rhino, dude. You know what I mean? Like, because he's been battle tested, right? And as Christian and as pastors are, but it's almost like you are that example to be like, listen, look at me. Like I'm battle tested. I'm going through suffering, but you're called to the same thing, and I'm just exemplifying it for you.
Yeah.
How to go through those moments, how to disciple and feel that from people. You know what I mean? I think that's an interesting thing that you're bringing up there.
The richness of Paul's letters have become so much more real now, being as a pastor. That just sentence, you know, follow me as I follow Christ.
That used to scare me.
Well, it still scares me.
Right. Yeah.
Because I'm gonna cry if I start talking about this, but
Fair, man.
just the idea that I would have even the slightest opportunity, even a fraction of the idea that somehow I can lead someone to know Christ more fully, man, and to know that I'm just as broken as them. There's nothing special about me, bro. There's nothing special about me, you know. I'm just a slave of the kingdom. What else can I do? And to think that I could be considered worthy of the work of Christ, that I should even think about considering saying, follow me. That sentence right there before, I'm perfectly fine saying, follow Christ.
Yeah.
Don't follow me.
Yeah.
But I truly want to live in as much as humbly as I can. I truly want to live to the degree that I could humbly and meekly say to someone, just follow me. I'm following Jesus, man. You know, because I don't think Paul was trying to say, man, get it together. Look at me. I got it together. Follow me because I'm following Christ. I don't think that's his.
No.
I don't think that's his point.
His attitude wasn't like that.
I don't think. I think he's saying that in his brokenness, bro.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
I can. That's what I'm saying. I can understand Paul's letters even on a more deep and profound understanding as a spiritual father to his churches. Yeah, I can understand his heart.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because that's yeah, like if you want to talk about like being beat up, or like, you know, I think, oh yeah, you can say, well, man, I've shared in Christ's sufferings, like, yeah, I'm getting beat up and stuff. But then the coin that I used to think about was like that in integrity and purity and joy and love and, you know, the fruit of the Spirit. But yeah, man, that's a good to be even considered worthy. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And we, you know, again, it's like it's all textbook, right? We know we're in Christ and it's His righteousness and all this stuff. But it's like you know you. I know me.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, what I want to do here in our last few minutes is I want to kind of deconstruct a little bit of this video here that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
This is from Joe Rogan's podcast.
All right on.
I like talking about or through his stuff, because most Christians won't even think about talking about through these things. But he talks to a guru here.
Okay.
He's talking to a guru here, and he's talking about heaven. And he's talking about it in a very American Christianized way. Because I hear a lot of Christians talking like this. This is sad, but here it is. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No, today we have come to this place where if you want to be peaceful, you need a chemical. You
Yeah.
want to be joyful, you need a chemical. You want to be healthful, you need a chemical. Well, you want to be ecstatic, of course there is a chemical.
Right.
So, what is the consequence of this? Why this is happening? One thing is, in this generation, one thing that's happened in people's minds is the heaven has collapsed in people's minds.
The heaven.
Yes.
How so?
See, I've been talking to people. 50 years ago, if I spoke to people and I asked how many of you want to go to heaven, almost 80% would raise their hands. Today, you go to your university and ask them, how many of you want to go to heaven? They'll say, they think it's a ridiculous question.
All right, so that right there.
Okay.
That's what really compelled me to want to start talking about that is he's making a cultural distinction here.
Right.
About if you pull the microphone just a little bit closer to you. He's making a cultural distinction here. He's saying that culturally, Americans 50 years ago would have wanted to go to heaven because they would have had an idea of what heaven is.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a joke. And I wonder if it's because Christians have not really, I don't really hear about heaven and hell.
Right. But do you think what he's saying in the first part because Christians have found heaven here on earth?
That's what he's getting to.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's how Christians talk.
Yeah.
That's how they talk today.
So because of that, like that's been gone. The whole like, wait, this is not everything there is, and so now the culture is like, it's like a nihilism.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah. It's nihilism and it's partly hedonism, which I think it's. This is why it's super important to talk about this because Christians have adopted an Eastern mystic form of Christianity that your biggest potential in life is you.
Right.
So you have to become your own heaven.
Right.
Or get rid of the hell. I heard a YouTube clip of this guy trying to describe hell as it was described by ancient church fathers, saying it was about getting rid of hell inside of you.
Okay.
And I'm like, that's not it at all.
Kind of like a purging of the thoughts. That's a very Buddhistic, right, type of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh wow.
So here's more of the clip.
All right? Nobody will raise their hand. So in their minds, heaven has collapsed, there's no place to go. So they want to do it everything here, all right?
I see.
So they have not found how to be joyful and ecstatic within themselves. So chemical usage, initially it became alcohol, then it became chemicals, it's getting stronger and stronger. And so many people dying of those things every day and illnesses, and it's costing a nation and the world a lot. It's not just in one country, it's going across the world.
Right. So the utilization of drugs, before it was clear. Christian, don't smoke weed. It was
Right.
very clear.
Right.
Don't get into DMT.
Right.
These are all gateways into the spiritual realm.
Right.
But now
Right.
it's just viewed as another way of expanding your mind. It's another way of escape. It's another way of going to sleep. Christians will make a defense for edibles to go to sleep.
Right. Insomnia, right?
Insomnia, yeah.
Right. So what about then? So, and this is where we get kind of tricky because we have to kind of differentiate between how much mental health
Right.
has impacted even the Christian community,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Much more so that seems logical. You're right. That's I can't sleep. That's a mental health issue. I have anxiety, right? You go so mental health is huge, and I think this is one of the things that we're trying to tell our people is like, listen, how much of the world, let's just step back, has really influenced the church. has infiltrated it. You know.
Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah, to the degree where people are okay with certain practices.
Right.
They're okay with taking certain substances. I tell Christians this, and this is my perspective, my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
The only justifiable way marijuana could ever be used is if you could not take anything else in order to keep food down. Like if you're on chemo or you're on some really bad drug in order to get over cancer or something.
Right.
You just cannot eat food, and a little small quantity of marijuana helps you to keep some food down, to eat. I'd be like, fine. Just like if you were to break your back and they give you Vicodin for the pain, fine, take it. But if you're taking Vicodin to go to sleep,
Right.
no.
Right. Right.
If you're smoking weed to go to sleep, or taking edibles, or taking a perk to go to sleep,
Yeah.
no.
Right. Yeah. You know how insane you sound though to like the Christian, even the Christian
I
community.
know. That's what I'm saying.
That's scary, man. Yeah. I mean, this is something for someone to start railing and making all kinds of comments right now. Well, did you know? What about blah, blah, blah? And it's like, we don't even hold on. Reactionary. We're so reactionary. Just think about what you're saying. Just really, really contemplate about what's going on and the effects of it and all these things that like. It's not just like, you know, it's not just a physical issue. It can it be of a spiritual issue, right? Like you said. Yeah. We separate all these different things because we don't think we're spiritual beings or we have no soul.
Well, that's what he was trying to get at, is that if it's true culturally that the idea of heaven has fallen out of people's minds, then that means the concept of a spiritual reality and of the metaphysical world that is the spirit world, demons and angels and God, you know, then that doesn't necessarily exist. Everything's physical, natural. Everything's here and tangible. You can measure it. You can see it. You can do experiments with it. And if that's the case, then all of your answers need to be found in the physical, not in the spiritual.
What if? And I think also what we could be thinking is, when have we said that suffering is bad?
Yeah.
Right. If
Well, even that idea is radical.
I know, but isn't that the that's the gospel that the culture is saying, right? We believe in, you know, for those in Christ that die in Christ, there's no more pain, no more suffering, right? All these things, and so I think for the unbeliever and for your nominal Christian, I don't know, they like suffering should be bad. We should do away with it. And maybe God's given us these things so that He could do away with it.
Yeah.
Instead of like, no, suffering on this earth is sure to come in every aspect. And it's always as a tool by the Creator Himself. It's like this place is cursed. Your body's dying. Our bodies are dying. And it's almost like we don't want to face that truth. And so in God's providence and wisdom and knowledge, all of this is to make us cry out, God, we need you.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think most Christians don't have it worked out that God purposes those things. They think it's just random acts of evil that God can use, rather than God purposing those things in order to actually bring about our sanctification.
Right, absolutely.
And I think that's the issue, is we have this idea that God must bring about. Okay, Romans 8:28, beautiful verse.
Sure.
You know, that God works out all things for good for those who love Him, those who are called according to His purpose.
Right.
But we define good as what we think is good for us.
Yeah.
God works out good for me? Well, that's good because I like good. I know what good is for me. So obviously God's going to work out my good for me. No. He's going to work out His good for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's some suffering.
Yeah. To make you conform to the image of His Son. Like he's what's it called? He's we used to sing a song, Refiner's Fire.
Yeah.
And where does that
sing? I want to go sing it now. I remember that song. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
All right, let's keep a few more minutes.
Law enforcement agencies may be controlling it a little bit, but they can never control it totally because the consumption is mass-based. It is… more people may be consuming these things than people eating bread. It's becoming like that. So, this whole movement, where it's going means, if you do not raise human consciousness, if you do not teach people how to sit here feeling absolutely blissed out within yourself by your own nature, because this human mechanism is the most sophisticated chemical factory. If you are a good CEO, you would produce the chemicals that will give you fantastic experience. If you're a lousy CEO, you're giving yourself a bad experience.
Yes.
Now you're buying chemicals from outside to fix that, all right? So essentially, you're a bad manager of your own system. You're not taken charge of this. Why has that happened? Because your education, your society is talking about conquering the world, but never taught you anything about how to take charge of this. Do you agree with me?
Yes.
The most… in this room, there's so much technology here. In this room, the most complex and sophisticated technology is within your system. Yes or no? Human system.
Yes.
This is. Have you read the user's manual?
Joe Rogan looks
There's no use.
annoyed.
There is.
There is?
Yes.
Where is it
It's
at?
built into the machine.
Oh, how do I get it?
You need to pay attention, you're reading inner engineering. Read that carefully. There are…
I'm reading it. I'm in the middle. I'm at part 2.
there are pointers as to how to read your own user's manual.
Yes. Let me take you back to this concept of heaven. You know, when
Here's
you're
what I
talking
wanted to get
about
to right here.
people in universities that you say, how many of them want to go to heaven? The problem is they don't have any evidence of heaven. And so when a lot of these young people that are atheists
that's
or
the natural
agnostics,
concept
they
of heaven,
don't
it was-
want to buy into anything that they believe is connected to fairy tales, or they're connected to some sort of an ideology that they believe was manufactured to control people and to keep people
That's
in
what I
check
said, the heaven has
Yes.
collapsed in their minds.
in their minds. But
Yep.
it's also because heaven is connected to religion, and religion is connected to atrocities. There's a lot of people
There's a
that
historical
think
argument,
of
yeah.
religion, they think of the evils of the Catholic Church, or they think of, you know, what religion has justified, the horrors of history, the things that people have done in the name of religion. So a lot of younger, sophisticated, intelligent people don't want to believe in anything that there's no evidence for. So when you say, how many of them want to go to heaven, say, show me a video. Tell me where I'm going. Do you have a map
No,
of heaven?
I'm not asking that question,
know.
offering a ticket. I'm just telling you, heaven has collapsed in people's mind, which is a good thing, because…
It's a good thing?
It is because the idea that this is not the place to live well, there
Right.
is another place where you will live
Right, I
well, is a
see.
wrong idea.
Right.
This is the place to live well.
You can have heaven right here.
Yes.
That's the conclusion, okay? So, he said a bunch of things there. First and
Yeah.
foremost, that your body has a system that you are in control of, and that if you don't take care of that body, then you can actually end up not living well. And then if you do, you can actually end up living well. There's some ideas there that might be true.
Sure. Absolutely.
But for the Christian, we are not to think as our bodies or this life as the supreme goal
Right.
of our joy or our experiences.
Right. Right. Paul, going back to Paul, interestingly enough, he wouldn't completely disagree with what he's saying, because what does he tell Timothy? Bodily exercise is of benefit. Absolutely. And I think that would encompass everything he's talking about. Bodily exercise. It's keeping like your insides running and everything's good. But he says godliness is better in this life and in the next. Interesting that Paul would use that to like really say what really matters is the exercise of your soul. Right? That's what we have Philippians, right, too, where he says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, and it's like, because it's God who rules in you. But it's interesting that he does mention that. And I think for the most part, like you said, that philosophy though, it makes you wonder. And I go back to the resurrection, man. If Christ did, if our people understand, dude, I don't even think it's heaven anymore. It's like, there's an actual man that's been raised from the dead. He's the only one that can speak on this, on heaven and hell. because he was raised, he experienced death, he experienced hell, and not in the sense of going down and blah, 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 but, you know what I mean. But he experienced judgment, the full cup of God's wrath, fully. And now he's in heaven because he raised from the dead as a bodily person. Death couldn't hold him. So the question, I don't think for the Christian should be, does heaven exist or whatever. It's like, if a man has been raised from the dead, then you owe him. But if he has not, then live your life as your best life now.
Yeah.
I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and because people don't necessarily think that there is a heaven or a hell anymore,
Right.
then they fall into nihilism,
Right.
and hedonism.
Yes.
Which is, what's it all for? And if it's all for nothing, then I might as well indulge in every aspect of this life has to offer.
Yes.
So I think,
And what's being preached from the pulpit is only assuring them that.
it's essentially this,
Yeah.
but with Jesus.
Right.
You can become your
Yeah,
own God. You
yeah.
can become the best that you can be. Joel Osteen wrote a book,
Your best life now.
I Am.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
To take the covenant name of God, Yahweh,
Yeah.
and to write a book about who you can be as the best person possible.
So subtle, dude.
It's crazy that
yeah.
people buy into these self-help ideas
Yeah.
when it's really just essentially Eastern mysticism
Yeah.
tied with Christian morality.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And so the unbeliever looks at us and says, well, you live just like me. You desire the same things as me. You don't do well with suffering like me.
Right.
You want the best life now like me. So we're living the same life. You just call yourself a Christian, and I just don't call myself a God follower. But we're the same person. So the world looks at Christianity and says, what's the difference? What's the difference?
What's it offering? Yeah, nothing. That's a good, man. That's cool. That's good. That's good. Good breaking that apart though, because that's scary stuff.
Yeah.
And there's it's broad, man. And there's places packed
You know.
in these like so-called churches.
Yeah. Sad, man. Hey, brother, I know it's getting late. I know you got to get home. So I appreciate you
That was
taking
good,
the time, man.
Dude, that's like, I felt like it's only been a half hour, bro. It's been great.
No, I appreciate you taking the time and coming on Reform Perspective, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank
Go
you.
check out his
Appreciate
website again, increasedecrease.org. If you live in Hesperia, looking for a church plan to get involved with, hit him up. Christ Alone Community Church. You can search him on Facebook. Man, love you, bro.
I love you too, brother. Thank you again for allowing me in your home.
Oh, yeah,
I appreciate you.
absolutely. Yeah.
Appreciate all the work that you're doing, and we're praying for you. And can't wait this Sunday to
Yeah,
go to your
bro, this
church,
Sunday's
bro.
gonna be awesome, man.
Yeah.
For those, for our congregation, Pastor Gerry is going to come preach on our Sunday, and their worship team is going to lead our Sunday. So I'm excited for that, man. It's going to be
sure.
great.
All
right, man. God bless.
Okay.
All right, and everybody on home, appreciate you guys tuning in. Appreciate everybody who shares and like this. Please go ahead and hit the subscribe button, share the video, comment below. Give me some questions, man, for the next Reform Perspective. We'll see you next time. God bless.